Hello everyone, this is author Sherelle Wallace in Eleuthera in the Bahamas. I am doing a series on the business of writing. This is a PSA series and this is part 4 of the series in the business of writing. And in part 4, I am going to be sharing some of my numbers when it comes to business. Some of this information I shared at a Writer's Day. This was in December last year, so that's 2025. Some of this information was what I shared in an author's talk where there were 4 authors who were invited to come and do a talk and to also sell their books. So some of this is taken from there. And I mentioned before that when I began writing, and as has continued, I see writing as a professional business, as a career. So I take my numbers very seriously because, as you know, in business, you want to make sure that your assets are more than your liabilities, and you want to make sure that you actually turn a profit, because no one is in business if they're not intending to make a profit. So I'm just going to have to remove my glasses for this because I do want to read. But I had mentioned that in 2026, my yearly expenses and what I need to comfortably earn a living in the Bahamas is a minimum of $15,000. And that does not include vacation. So to break down the numbers, currently minimum wage in the Bahamas is $6.50 per hour, and I earn minimum wage. 7.5 years into being fully self-employed, I was forced to take a job working for someone else again, forced financially because I just was not making it as a self-employed person, because as I always say, the numbers never lie and your income determines a lot. So to break that down, if we're looking at a yearly income of $15,000, when you divide that by 12 for 12 months, you get $1,250 per month. So if you're earning minimum wage, that is your average income. When you divide that for the weeks, that is $312.50 per week, and that is slightly above minimum wage. Because I work 7 days a week, I also divided that by 7, the $312 by 7, because there are no days off for me as a self-employed person, and particularly as a writer. And that comes to $45 per day. So when I look at what I need to earn from sales of my books as a fiction writer, I look at earning $45 per day. And again, let me stress that when I say earning, I am not talking about book sales ranking that you would see on Amazon and some of these other platforms, because as I said before, rankings on Amazon are not actually what is money in the bank for you. So if you have free promos, if you have books where you're selling for 5 cents and you have a lot of customers who purchase on those promo days or who purchase on those greatly discount amounts, and then let's say you have 1,000 of those people who have downloaded, bought your book, in a promo sale and you screenshot that to reflect what your book earnings are and how your book actually sells, that is not a good representation of, at the end of the day, what you receive in terms of income. Yes, doing the free promos is very good in getting your name out there, getting people to know that you are a writer and letting them know what you have available. But there are millions of writers who are out there with good work, who are getting their name out there, and they're doing free promos, and they're doing these. It is such a large consumer area. And I am going to talk more about that later down, because if you stick with the series, at the end of it, I do have a proposal. So this is a lot to unpack, but at the end of the series, I do have a proposal. I am going somewhere with this, so if you would please bear with me. So back to the income that I would have to earn from book sales in order to support myself strictly as an author for the year. If I say 15,000, so what that breaks down to is my books on average, because I sell on Amazon as well as I sell from imported books that I bring in myself, and 95 to 96% of my sales have been from books that I've purchased on Amazon or on Lulu, imported into the country, into the Bahamas, and resold. 95 to 96% of my sales have been that. But we're going to take an average of $12 per book for me. So if I'm selling an average of $12 per book, and I want to earn at the end of the year $15,000, that would mean that I have to sell 4 books per day, and we're looking at 365 days of the year, because of course when you're selling on Amazon, any other platform, even the shop that I have, you're earning money every day. So 4 books per day, 28 books per week, 112 books per month, and 1,344 books per year. That is the amount of books I would have to sell in order to earn $15,000 per year, with an average of my book selling for $12 each. So again, the numbers never lie, and you really have to look at your numbers. That is my figures, and I'm just going to go through some of the expenses that are incurred. The first full-length novel that I published, this is A Blessing in Disguise. And when I wrote this, I contacted an editor, because before I was doing all of my editing, I talked about editing mistakes in previous videos in the series. I contacted an editor and I got a quote of $1,000. The editor I had sent my required number of pages, said that this novel would be a 50,000 plus word novel, and I got a quote for $1,000 for this book to be edited, and then I would independently publish on Amazon KDP. And right away I knew that I could not hire that editor, and it brought up the issue of whether I could afford to hire any editor, because with that quote, I ended up editing the book myself, published the book on Amazon. The book is available on Amazon, and on Amazon it sells for $10. The book imported into the Bahamas and sold at my gift shop and sold at various events sells for $20. I decided not to go with the editor whose fee was $1,000 because I asked myself what the chances were for me in my selling lifetime, what the chances were for me to earn $1,000 for this single title. I cannot start to count profit until I've made $1,000 because that $1,000 would be what I paid an editor. And of course, there are other expenses. So if I'm importing the book to resell, there are more expenses on top of the $1,000 that has gone into the cost of producing the book. And of course, you have to look at my labor. As a writer, I spend a lot of time working on my books. So how much do I want to be paid as an author? And then you have your import fees. On Amazon, for this book to earn $1,000, I would have to sell at $10. I would have to sell 100 copies of A Blessing in Disguise to earn just what it has cost the editor. Imported, sold at $20, I would have to sell 50 copies of this single title before I can start to calculate other expenses and other profit to make the book profitable. And for someone like me, a fiction author who intends to write and publish 80 books in my lifetime, it's impossible for me to turn a profit with those type of figures. A lot of writers, because I know my sister does, they use beta readers, and beta readers is an excellent resource. It really, and some beta readers are paid. They're not all free. But it really is a good resource because a lot of beta readers are readers and not writers. So there's a difference. And you can have someone read your book, critique your book, do slight editing, and sometimes as writers we do it for one another. I've not done the beta reader because I did have someone read A Blessing in Disguise who read it for free, and she did it as a way for her to start an editing business. So I did get some feedback on it, but I didn't hire a beta reader for A Blessing in Disguise. So, but those are resources that are really good. If you can get a beta reader, fine. And you have to be open to constructive criticism, which I am. But again, for me, finding beta readers and going through that, it does prove to be a little bit time consuming. So back to the conference that was in Nassau. Those were some of my numbers and my figures. And at the end of the day, even with the conference, I've had to calculate my costs, my expenses, to determine whether it is a venture that was worth it. I live on Eleuthera. The conference was in Nassau. So the conference was planned well in advance, months and months in advance. And I funded the cost of the conference strictly from working for someone else. After 7.5 years of being completely self-employed, I went back to working for someone else. So then my being self-employed was not my main source of income. Had I not worked for someone else, the conference would be impossible. So I planned around being in Nassau in December, and I knew how the business of writing worked. So I was aware that I was not going to turn a profit from this book signing and book sales event. I also planned during that trip to have a number of eye tests done, and also I purchased these glasses. And I calculated my airfare, and traveling to Nassau is very expensive. My airfare, my hotel, taxis, and bus fees back and forth. So I'm going in for a conference. Of course, I can't go on a one-day excursion because you'd have to fly in the day before the event and fly out the day after, because the event was from 10 to 5. So that's an all-day event. That is, at least for the event, 2 nights for a hotel. Adding in my doctor's visits and my shopping for my gift shop, because I had to make this financially viable, I ended up spending 4 nights in Nassau, 4 nights at the hotel. At the event, I sold a total of 9 books. There were 1 or 2 swaps with other authors, but I sold a total of 9 books, which resulted in $110 in sales, which means I was attending this event and operating my business at a loss. $110 didn't even cover the airfare. So even if I was flying in for just the day to do the event, I would be operating at a loss because the airfare was more than $110. I received some perks for being one of the featured authors at the event, but it was a financial loss. And it also, during the conference and during the talk, brought up the issue of, if someone is going to take their writing career serious enough to actually consider all of the costs. And the proposal that I have, and the reason why I'm doing this series, is for fiction writers who want their writing to be a career. This is not for the person who works a traditional job and they have a story to tell. They have a story to tell, they have something to share, and they publish a book. This is not for those people. Those people may find that them holding a book launch where they're doing catering, they're doing music, they're doing all of this swag and gift bags, this is not for those people. When you calculate the costs involved in these book launch, I don't know of anyone who's actually turned a profit for these launch. And like I said, I had hope in my lifetime to publish at least 80 books. So obviously I'm not going to have a book launch. I'm not going to do all of the marketing and promos because the cost involved is just not viable. I've tried in the last 7 years to get funding for my writing, which I was not successful with. But in doing business plans for funding, you're really forced to calculate your costs and your expenses, because anybody giving you funding wants to know that the business is viable. And there are several ways where a fiction writer can calculate whether their business is viable or not. I'm going to end this series here, but please come back so that you can see the continuation and my proposal. Thank you so much for watching.